Although most people might think that television was invented many years after radio, actually, experiments were undertaken at about the same time, starting in the late 1800s. Radio and TV waves, after all, are just frequencies, sound and pictures easily transmitted through the air at the same time. The problem with television, though, was in sending moving pictures. Scientists in Britain, the US, Germany, and Russia were all independently working on that problem. The German favorite was Paul Nipkow, who, as a 23-year-old German graduate student, was the first scientist to send pictures through the air. Early radio and television sets were beautiful pieces of furniture. They had to be, because the electronics were not miniaturized as they are today. Although the BBC is given credit for the first network, it was actually the Nazis who launched national television service first in 1935. As was the case with other forms of media, they realized the enormous propaganda value of electronic media. Not only that, German engineers and scientists developed the very first cable TV system in the 1930s. 40 years before it became commonplace, called electronic news gathering, the Germans pioneered remote broadcasts. It wasn't exactly live TV as we know it, but the camera on the truck took a picture, developed it in less than a minute, and then that picture was sent over television signals out to TV receivers. These next two slides show the regular schedule of TV programs in the last week of March 1939. Despite the pleasant-sounding program titles, the Nazis were interested in TV as a means of controlling the population through nonstop propaganda. They did not see it as an entertainment medium. For the Nazis, cinema was both propaganda and escapism. The self-styled intellectual, propaganda minister Goebbels, wanted to keep elements of German cultural tradition strong and not just have 24/7 politics in German movies. Unfortunately for him, there was a large brain drain and talent drain of artists and filmmakers in the 1930s as they fled Germany. The constant drumbeat of propaganda in the films meant that fewer films were popular to be picked up for export. And, in turn, the Nazis prohibited the showing of most foreign films. The government nationalized the film industry in 1943, but in reality, small movie companies and movie theater owners' property was not disturbed. It was the content of the movies that the Nazis were after. This was a little different from the Soviet Union, where the government owned all of the movie theaters. The Nazis, too, had film trains, 2 of them, to make films available to rural areas, and they also supplied 300 film trucks for the same reason. There were strong content rules, however. A documentary had to be included in every night's cinema program. Also, there were very strong import quotas starting in the 1920s, and no foreign movies at all in the 1930s and during World War II. The greatest fiasco in Nazi movie history was the remake of Titanic. Of course, in this movie, the hero was a completely fictitious German officer. The British were all idiots, and this was to conform with the Nazi view of the world, that British and American capitalists were responsible for the sinking of the ship and the loss of life, and that Nazi methods were superior in both seamanship and filmmaking. In the movie, it's the German officer who begs the rich capitalists to slow down, for safety's sake, to avoid the icebergs. The production itself was nearly as big a disaster as the sinking of the boat. For realism, some German sailors were on the set as consultants, but they were harassing the actresses so much the director complained about them. The director was then reported back to the Gestapo, who had him arrested. 24 hours later, the director was found hanged in his jail cell, ruled a suicide. Everybody's a movie critic. The new director was reliable, as they say, a friend of Goebbels. But at that point, the spending was way out of control. It was the most expensive movie production of its time. In fact, any movie, anytime, shot on the water, near the water, or under the water, is going to be expensive. Finally, the movie was finished. Decent reviews from European cities under German occupation ensued, but the movie was not shown in Germany. Goebbels, by this point in 1943, did not want the German people, now being bombed daily, to see mass death. Every once in a while you can catch this oddity on one of the history or educational cable channels.